So our next candidate is Julius Cherry. He retired from the Sacramento Fire Department at the rank of fire chief in 2007 after more than 30 years of service. Prior to becoming chief, he held the ranks of firefighter, captain, baton chief, assistant chief, and deputy chief. That's a lot of chiefs. Where's all those Indians? Kind of inject a little bit of fun into this guy, bear with me. Julius is a great guy. He's also been a practicing attorney for 22 years, handling a variety of civil matters. He's the CEO of the Cherry Consulting Group, which provides advisory services to fire protection organizations. Julius chairs the Community Advisory Board for Dignity Health, formerly Catholic Healthcare West. He's past chair and current board member of Goodwill Industries of Sacramento Valley and Northern Nevada. In 2011, he chaired the Sacramento Redistricting Citizens Advisory Committee, charged with advising the city government on reshaping the 8 council districts after the 2010 census. From 1994 to 2001, Julius served and chaired the Sacramento County Project Planning Commission, assisting the commission in making entitlement decisions. He is a past board member of the Sacramento County Fair Board as a governor appointee. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force. He attended a night school to earn his doctorate, Juris Doctorate, from the University of the Pacific, McGeorge School of Law, and a Bachelor of Science in Public Administration from California State University. Got another Florida in front. Julius is married with 3 daughters, 1 son, and 4 grandchildren. Welcome, Julius.
Good morning. Thank you, Alice. And I did start out as an Indian, so I held a lot of chief positions, but I started on the back of the fire engine. I too would like to acknowledge and pay honor to Honorable Cruz Reynoso. As a lawyer of color, he doesn't know me, but I want him to know that he's a hero of mine. So I want to start. So for those of you who don't know me, let me just tell you about my core values. I have a number of core values, but there are 3 particularly that I want to point out. Number 1 is my integrity. I believe you should mean what you say and say what you mean. I don't give my word lightly, but when you give your word is your bond. I'm just old school enough to believe that, taught to me by my great grandmother. Second is hard work. For those, thank you, Alice, for reading my resume. I went to, after serving the United States Air Force and joining the fire department, I went to college and law school over a period of 12 years for helping to raise 4 children and holding down a full-time job. I understand what hard work is. I'm extremely proud to be a 1982 graduate of California State University, as well as American River College before that in 1979. So hard work, commitment. I have a commitment to excellence and a commitment to the community. I passed the bar exam at age 36 years old after my 3rd try. I went to night school at the University of McGeorge, as we said. I used to be ashamed to tell people it took me 3 times to pass the bar at night school, but I think that the Honorable Cruz Reynoso would tell you that he knows what that kind of commitment takes, because as a lawyer of color, we often struggle with the California bar exam. So that's sort of who I am, and I want to be able to save time for questions. So listen, I'm running for a couple of reasons. 1, it's a personal commitment for me. This community has been very, very good to me, and it's been allowed me to be good to my family. Its institutions have been good to me. I am a graduate of American River College. I'm a graduate of Sac State. I'm a graduate of McGeorge School of Law at night. I had a 30-year career with the city of Sacramento, where I was blessed to rise to the ranks from firefighter, or Indian, as Alice would call it, to the chief of the fire department. My kids all went to public schools here in Sacramento. I had a child who graduated from Sac State. She graduated from Sac State as well. So my wife and daughter graduated from Sac State, but I have a child who graduated from Sac High, and I have 2 children that graduated from Kennedy High School. They all went on to college, one to law school at Catholic University, another one to USC grad school, and graduated just a couple of years ago, and I'm very proud of that. So it's a personal commitment to me to run. Public service is in my blood. 4 years in the Air Force, 30 years in the fire department. I'm a public service person, and so this is a commitment. Secondly, I think that my background, education experience makes me very, very qualified for this position. Alice talked about the fact that I served 7 years on the County Planning Commission. I ran the 2nd largest department in the city, 600 employees and a $100 million budget. Almost a third of the city's budget I managed when I was fire chief. So I have an experience level that I think that the public has a chance to elect somebody who's highly qualified for this position. And lastly, there must be more independent voices on the city council. I am an independent person. I'm not asking the folks at District 7 to elect me as their representative, to hire me as their representative, as their advocate, because I want to be cantankerous or disagreeable or anything like that. I'm a professional. I've been an attorney for 22 years. I've been involved in a case with lawyers on the other side where we didn't leave shaking hands and having respect for one another. So that's not an issue for me. I'll fit in just fine with the city council. But we need independent voices. Earlier people talked about a herd mentality. There is a herd mentality in City Hall. We need people that can speak out individually. So I'm going to close there and leave more time for questions. Yes?
Okay. What is your vision for the district and for the city of Sacramento?
I'm glad you asked that. Number one problem for District 7 is the same problem as for the entire city of Sacramento: long-term financial security. See, we can talk about all the sexy stuff, the arena all the time, those kinds of things. The arena's not the savior of the city. I have no problem with the arena. I think having an arena downtown is probably a good idea. I certainly think redeveloping downtown is a good idea. However, you know what this community needs? It needs jobs. And these jobs, and particularly in the Latino and African American community, as well as other communities of color, we need jobs. And so those are kinds of my vision. So there are a couple of things we need to do. Long-term financial stability. We heard people talk about the long-term debt of the city earlier. That has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with. Secondly, restoring basic services. I am a fundamental kind of person. You got to do the fundamentals before you do the fancy stuff. We laid off 40 cops a couple of years ago. We've been rounding out fire stations. Hopefully with this Measure U money, some of that stuff is going to come back. But we need to restore basic services. Police, fire, parks, roads, bridges. Those are the things that we ask taxpayers to raise money for, not to give away almost $300 million to some billionaires who paid $535 million for a basketball team and can't figure out how to finance the building without the taxpayers' help. So I have an issue with the financing plan because I'm worried about the city's general fund. When I was fire chief, you would inevitably get the memo every year. How can you run the fire department if we cut you by 10%, if we cut you by 5%, if we cut you by 2%? Please give us a plan to do these things. And oh, by the way, don't impact core services, don't impact response times, don't impact those kinds of things. Well, sometimes, I'm a do the math person, and sometimes the math doesn't work. And I am, there's some changes, you should be paying attention. There's some changes we're about to have the city council vote somewhere around May 13th on the new financing plan, because there are some changes that came out the other day. First, they were going to make up this gap between the debt service and how much the parking revenue did by surcharges and all kinds of other little creative financing mechanisms. Now they're saying, no, we're going to make lease payments because we're not really sure we want the city to know how profitable the team is during this period of time, so we're going to guarantee these lease payments. And it all sounds good, but I'm a guy that looks at the numbers. That's what I had to do when I ran the fire department. And so when you look at the math, there's a concern for me that the city's general fund may be impacted, which means your police, fire, parks, roads, bridges. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I worked for the county for 25 years, and I worked for foster youth for 7, and I want every one of those departments to put up foster youth, train these kids to get a job. These foster youth are children that are born and raised here in Sacramento. They ain't come from New Jersey or Florida or anything. They're these kids, homegrown kids, and if we're going to get any better, we got to take care of these homegrown kids now. So every one of those departments should have some kind of a job training program for youth, and it has to happen now.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Those are God's children. Those are our children. A couple months ago, we had some horrific shootings in Sacramento. We had 14 or 15 shootings over a period of a weekend where we had 4 kids dead. I have heard nothing from the city leadership about that issue. Nothing from the city leadership. It is appalling to me that I've heard nothing from this. I've heard all arena all the time. I've heard nothing. And crime crosses district lines. It doesn't matter. What happens when you take 40 police officers and you lay them off is the units who would deal with crime on the front end, like the gang unit, the narcotics unit, units that deal with parolees, those people simply get put back in black and whites so that they can respond to 911 calls, because your 911 calls have to be responded to. And so what happens is the crime prevention part of, somebody talked about community policing earlier, the crime prevention part of police work gets put on the back shelf in order to deal with the 911 calls. When I was the fire chief, I worked closely with Chief Albert Nahara, who is now the United States Marshal. And even though I was not the police chief, don't claim to be an expert in police, although I did spend some time as a arson investigator, which is in fact a law enforcement position. But Albert and I used to talk all the time. Our offices were 10 paces from one another down at the Public Safety Center on Freeport Boulevard. And he used to tell me how community policing was the answer to get ahead of these issues, where you know the police officer, the person who comes to your door, somebody you're familiar with, and those kinds of things. Those things were all lost during the last economic downturn. And we are slowly trying to put those things back into place. But if the money gets siphoned off for an amenity as opposed to a basic service, then we won't be able to effectively put those things back in place. I want to be on the city council to watch over the District 7. I'm asking the people of District 7 to hire me to be an advocate for them. I'm an attorney, I know how to be an advocate. That's why strong neighborhoods are the most important thing, and that's why I too am against the strong neighborhood. If there are no other questions, I'll take a seat. Thank you so much for allowing us to speak today.